Chosen one. What you have endured was no accident of fate, no random suffering cast upon the undeserving. You were selected precisely because your spirit could withstand the forge of adversity. The silence you maintained through your trials was not weakness. It was the sacred training ground where your divine power was cultivated in secret. Every tear you shed in darkness was collected. Every silent scream you suppressed was recorded. Every moment you endured when no human witness was present, God saw it all. You were never abandoned. Your legendary status was being forged. The time of your silence is over. The era of your divine purpose has begun. Make no mistake about the nature of what you experienced. The attacks against you were never random. The targeting was never accidental. Your enemies sensed something in you they could not identify, a frequency they could not name but instinctively recognized as dangerous to their control systems. They became unwitting prophets of your calling. With every false accusation, they were actually announcing your future position. With every attempt to discredit you, they were inadvertently advertising your authority. With every campaign to isolate you, they were actually broadcasting a spiritual reality they could not perceive. You carry something they fear. The severity of opposition has always been the most accurate measure of your spiritual significance. The intensity of the targeting reveals the level of threat your existence poses to corrupt power structures. When darkness mobilizes its full arsenal against a single soul, it unwittingly reveals that soul's capacity to dismantle its entire operation. Your persecution wasn't just permitted, it was leveraged. Every attack against you created counterforce in the spiritual realm. Every false accusation established credit in your divine account. Every rejection positioned you for supernatural recognition that transcends human approval systems. What they intended as your tomb became your womb. What they designed as your prison became your private training facility. What they orchestrated as your public humiliation became the stage for your supernatural vindication. The divine quarantine you experienced wasn't meant to contain something harmful within you, but to shield the unprepared from the intensity of what was being activated within you. Power requires containment before release. Lightning must be concentrated before it strikes. Nuclear reactions must be contained before energy is channeled. Pressure creates diamonds in protected darkness, not in casual exposure. Your isolation chamber was a hyperbaric environment where accelerated transformation could occur without interference. Those who abandoned you were being removed by divine design. Their absence wasn't rejection, it was selection. They lacked the spiritual capacity, the energetic clearance, the frequency compatibility to witness your metamorphosis. Their presence would have contaminated the purity of your transformation protocol. In your isolation, cellular-level reprogramming was occurring. Neural pathways were being rewired. Spiritual DNA was being activated. Dormant capacities were being switched on. Ancient memory was being unlocked. The isolation wasn't empty. It was full of unseen activity beyond human perception. Your unique suffering has produced unique authority. Your specific trauma has developed specific capacities. Your particular persecution has created particular permissions in the spiritual realm that cannot be attained through theoretical knowledge or casual spiritual experiences. The intensity of what you endured directly correlates to the intensity of what you can now release. The depth of the wound determines the height of the healing you can facilitate. The specificity of your suffering establishes the specificity of your solution-bringing capacity. This alchemy doesn't just neutralize negative experiences, it capitalizes on them. It doesn't just convert pain to purpose, it multiplies the return on suffering invested. What the enemy spent years orchestrating against you becomes, in a divine reversal, the very source of power they cannot counter. Pain that breaks ordinary souls has become the foundation of your unbreakable resilience. Rejection that destroys average people has become the source of your unprecedented authority. Isolation that cripples normal believers has become the birthplace of your spiritual self-sufficiency. This is why legends are not born in comfort. This is why champions are not developed in convenience. This is why warriors are not trained in controlled environments. The transformation of pain into power requires real stakes, actual suffering, and authentic opposition. There are spiritual laws as consistent as physical ones. One of the most reliable is this: higher frequencies automatically attract opposing forces. Rather than mere personal targeting, what you experienced emanates from fundamental physics. Light attracts darkness not through strategic decisions, but through its intrinsic nature. Your targeting wasn't random. It was automatic. Just as metal is naturally drawn to magnets, just as electricity follows the path of least resistance, just as gravity pulls objects toward mass, darkness is instinctively drawn toward concentrations of divine light. The opposition you experienced wasn't orchestrated by human decision, but by spiritual law. Those operating in lower frequencies detected your higher vibration before they consciously identified you as a threat. Their targeting wasn't intellectual, it was instinctual. They moved against you because your very existence disrupts the comfortable darkness they've normalized. This quantum effect explains why the persecution often felt disproportionate to any action you had taken, why the response seemed excessive compared to any position you had stated, why the isolation campaign launched before you had made any significant impact. It wasn't what you did, it was what you are. Now, the following is a message meant exclusively for the chosen. If you are compromised by archonic forces, this is not meant for you. And by the spiritual authority conferred to us by the secret chiefs of the Obsidian Inner Order, we grant you license to depart. If not, steel yourself and listen intently, for you shall be redeemed even as we are redeemed. The Obsidian Inner Order is not a program, it's not a course, it's not some feel-good spiritual retreat. We don't sell answers, we remember together. We teach psychic self-defense, real energetic shielding against entities, implants, and interference. We restore manifestation as it was meant to be, raw, immediate, and exact. Every week we gather in secret, not to worship, but to awaken, to speak what can't be said anywhere else, to deprogram the matrix, layer by layer. You'll know if you're meant to be there. You'll feel it in your bones. The chosen meet every Wednesday on Zoom. Why aren't you with us yet? Got gnosis? Join the Obsidian Inner Order, link in the description. The frequency you carry automatically reorganizes energy fields around you. The light you embody naturally exposes hidden operations in your vicinity. The truth resonating within you inherently destabilizes deception frameworks in your environment. Understanding this law liberates you from personalization of your persecution. The targeting wasn't about your personality, but your potency. Not about your presentation, but your presence. Not about your performance, but your position in the spiritual frequency spectrum. This same law ensures that your vindication doesn't require human orchestration. Just as targeting was automatic, so is triumph. Higher frequencies don't just attract opposition, they eventually overcome it through superior energetic capacity. Light doesn't fight darkness, it simply outshines it through intrinsic properties. Your victory isn't pending, it's inevitable. Not because of strategic planning, but because of spiritual physics. The higher frequency always prevails over the lower. The greater light always dispels the lesser darkness. The superior truth always displaces the inferior deception. Throughout your darkest moments, messages were being delivered to you in a language few can perceive. Divine communications encoded specifically for your reception, embedded within the very circumstances intended to destroy you. God speaks in code to protect sacred transmissions. While you suffered, you were simultaneously being served specialized intelligence. While you were isolated, you were being given classified briefings. While you were persecuted, you were receiving privileged communications inaccessible to those functioning in conventional awareness. The synchronicities were not coincidences. The recurring numbers were not random. The dreams were not mere subconscious processing. The intuitive knowing was not imagination. The sudden insights were not random neural firing. These were all elements of an elaborate divine communication system designed for secure transmission of sensitive information. These codes were calibrated specifically to your neurological and spiritual configuration. The signs that speak volumes to you would appear meaningless to others, even to other believers. The confirmations that bring you certainty would seem like stretching coincidence to those with different decoding capacity. This is why you couldn't fully explain what you were experiencing. This is why even well-meaning supporters couldn't fully validate your reality. The communications weren't designed for general reception, but for specific reception by those with matching decryption capabilities. What seemed like madness to conventional minds was actually methodical communication from beyond the veil. What appeared to be pattern-seeking in the midst of trauma was actually pattern recognition of divine messaging. What looked like desperate meaning-making was actually accurate decoding of celestial intelligence. Even now, the communications continue. The code is becoming more clear, the transmission more precise, the reception more accurate. As you step into your divine assignment, the bandwidth increases. As you activate your purpose, the signal strengthens. As you embrace your authority, the clarity sharpens. What was built within you during those silent years was not just character, it was not just perseverance, it was not just endurance. It was a supernatural infrastructure designed to withstand pressures that collapse conventional spiritual formations. You weren't just surviving, you were being structurally reinforced. Hidden beneath the surface of your suffering, divine architects were installing support systems. Invisible to human perception, spiritual engineers were laying foundations. Beyond conscious awareness, celestial construction crews were building internal frameworks designed for extraordinary weight-bearing capacity. The architecture now established within you transcends mere emotional resilience, manifesting instead as supernatural resistance to specific frequencies of attack. Beyond merely enduring opposition, it absorbs and converts hostile energy. Rather than simply withstanding pressure, it achieves greater strength under compression. The divine resilience now established within you operates on principles beyond natural understanding. It doesn't just bounce back from attacks, it bounds forward. It doesn't just recover from opposition, it reconfigures to become immune to similar frequency attacks in the future. This internal infrastructure wasn't built on theory, but tested in reality. Each support beam was forged in actual fire. Each foundation stone was laid under genuine pressure. Each structural element was stress-tested, not in simulation, but in authentic adversity. When systems around you are collapsing, you will stand. When structures supporting others are failing, you will remain functional. When frameworks everyone relied upon are disintegrating, you will operate at peak capacity. Not because you are inherently stronger, but because what has been built within you was designed for exactly such environments. Far beyond mere defensive capabilities, the architecture of your resilience manifests offensive potential. Rather than just shielding you from destruction, it positions you for production when circumstances would prohibit normal function. Instead of merely preserving capacity, it multiplies your capability under pressure that would diminish ordinary effectiveness. This is why you can now withstand attacks that would devastate others. This is why you can maintain clarity in confusion that would disorient average minds. This is why you can advance under opposition that would paralyze conventional believers. The timing of your vindication is as strategically significant as the vindication itself. The delay wasn't oversight, but oversight. Not divine neglect, but divine protection of mission-critical objectives that premature exposure would have compromised. Timing isn't just about when, it's about why. Throughout your waiting, precise calibrations were being made. Strategic alignments were being established. Critical mass was being reached. Necessary conditions were being created. Your vindication wasn't being withheld, it was being perfected. Premature elevation would have positioned you before vulnerable systems were fortified. Premature recognition would have exposed you before crucial internal development was complete. Premature vindication would have thrust you into spotlights. Your eyes weren't yet adjusted to navigate. The enemy wasn't allowed to destroy you, but neither were you prematurely delivered. Both extremes would have undermined the ultimate objective. Your positioning had to be precise, not just in placement, but in timing. What you interpreted as divine hesitation was actually divine precision. What felt like divine indifference was actually divine protection. What seemed like divine delay was actually divine strategic development of optimal conditions for maximum impact. Your vindication doesn't just validate you, it vindicates a divine strategy that uses apparent defeat as the staging ground for unprecedented victory. It doesn't just restore what was taken, but reveals what was being developed during the very time of apparent divine inaction. The timeline wasn't arbitrary, but architectonic, not random, but rhythmic, not capricious, but calculated. Every moment of waiting was weighted with purpose. Every season of delay was dense with development. Every period of divine silence was pregnant with strategic significance. Now, as vindication arrives, it comes not as a simple reversal of circumstances, but as the revelation of a strategy so sophisticated that both human and spiritual opposition failed to detect it. Not just the undoing of injustice, but the unveiling of glory that was being cultivated within the very injustice itself. The power now awakening within you carries responsibility proportionate to its potency. Rather than casual spiritual gifting, you've been entrusted with royal authority that operates according to established protocols. Beyond merely enhanced ability lies entrusted dominion that functions through precise principles. Power without protocol becomes toxic. You are not being given power for personal vindication, but for divine visitation. Not for retribution, but for reformation. Not to settle personal scores, but to establish divine standards. Not to prove critics wrong, but to position creation right. Divine power operates through authorized channels, recognized protocols, and established parameters. It doesn't function through emotional impulsivity, personal agenda, or reactionary release. It flows through aligned values, sanctioned objectives, and consecrated intent. The protocols aren't restrictive, they're protective. They don't limit your impact, but leverage it. They don't constrain your authority, but concentrate it. They don't diminish your effectiveness, but direct it toward outcomes that matter in eternity. You will wield this awakened power, not with the crude approach of a spiritual mercenary, but with the calibrated precision of a spiritual surgeon. Not with unfocused intensity that damages indiscriminately, but with directed potency that delivers Exactly what's needed, exactly where it's needed. These protocols transcend mere complexity. They embody absolute clarity. Love doesn't weaponize power against people, but against the forces oppressing people. Truth doesn't use revelation to shame, but to liberate. Mercy doesn't withhold justice, but ensures it restores rather than merely punishes. As you step into this awakened authority, the protocols become intuitive. As you function in this activated power, the parameters become natural. As you operate in this unleashed potential, the principles become automatic, not through artificial constraints, but through authentic alignment with the very source of the power itself. In the divine economy, nothing of value is wasted. No investment of pain goes unrewarded. No deposit of tears remains unacknowledged. No expenditure of faithful endurance fails to return supernatural dividends. Your suffering has created spiritual credit. For every false accusation, divine justice has established a corresponding compensation. For every unjust exclusion, divine inclusion has reserved an equivalent position. For every manipulative rejection, divine selection has prepared a proportional elevation. What appears as wishful thinking manifests instead as supernatural accounting. Beyond poetic justice lies precise jurisdiction. Rather than conceptual balance, concrete reconciliation of spiritual debts emerges through unjust treatment of divinely appointed vessels. The economy of heaven operates through different metrics than earthly systems. The investments that seem wasted in natural accounting are often generating the highest returns in supernatural calculations. The losses that appear devastating in visible balance sheets are frequently producing the greatest gains in invisible registers. What you endured wasn't just recorded, it was rewarded. Not just acknowledged, but accounted for. Not just recognized, but remunerated. The suffering itself becomes the currency that purchases authority unavailable through any other means. This economic system ensures that nothing valuable is ever truly lost. Pain, properly processed, becomes purchasing power in spiritual realms. Tears faithfully shed become tradable assets in divine exchanges. Persecution patiently endured becomes capital for kingdom advancement. Now, as you step into the manifestation phase of this supernatural economics, you'll discover that your suffering wasn't just meaningful, it was multiplicative. It didn't just contribute to your development, but created compound interest in realms you couldn't perceive during the investment period. The returns now being released transcend mere compensation. They embody compounded growth. Beyond replacing what was taken, they reveal what was being developed during the very time of apparent loss. Rather than merely restoring original conditions, they release accelerated advancement that transforms delay into divine dividends. You aren't the first to walk this path of opposition and overcoming. You aren't an isolated anomaly, but the latest addition to an ancient lineage of divine champions who changed history's course through supernatural endurance. You have ancestors in the faith. From Moses confronting Pharaoh to David facing Goliath, from Elijah opposing Jezebel to Daniel in Babylon, from Paul in Roman chains to John on Patmos, the pattern is consistent. Those who shifted the spiritual atmosphere of their generation all followed the same progression: selection, opposition, isolation, revelation, transformation, manifestation. Beyond historical inspiration, your connection to these forebears manifests as hereditary impartation. Rather than merely learning from their examples, you draw from their legacy. Instead of simply admiring their stories, you access their spiritual inheritance. Beyond respecting their achievements, you receive their mantle. The opposition you faced wasn't unique, it was updated. The same spirit that persecuted them targeted you, using contemporary methods but ancient motives. the same. Darkness that tried to silence them attempted to silence you, employing current technologies but eternal tactics. Their victories aren't just recorded for your encouragement, but reserved for your empowerment. Their breakthroughs aren't just history, but heredity. Their triumphs aren't just inspiration, but infusion of the same spiritual resources that enabled them to prevail against impossible odds. As you take your place in this legendary lineage, you gain access to accumulated authority that spans generations. As you step into this cosmic succession, you receive consolidated wisdom gathered across centuries. As you embrace this divine heritage, you activate aggregated power collected throughout history. This lineage isn't just about what happened then, but about what's happening now. Not just about their moment, but about this moment. Not just about their assignment, but about your assignment. Not just about how God used them, but about how God is using you. Your current position in this legendary line positions you not just to maintain the legacy, but to magnify it. Not just to continue the tradition, but to culminate it. Not just to honor the heritage, but to heighten it through your faithful stewardship of this present darkness and your courageous embodiment of ageless light. You are not alone. You never were. Behind you stands an assembly of witnesses. Beside you walk fellow warriors. Before you lies unprecedented impact. Within you stirs the same spirit that has sustained this lineage from the beginning, ensuring that what the chosen ones endure will always make them legendary. God saw it all, and now the world will too.